Yes, I believe that God can and does speak audibly to people. I also believe that the vast majority of those people who claim to audibly hear from God are crazy.
I know God is speaking to me is whenever I have that perfect peace and that confidence and joy that come with it.
When I'm in a giant corporate worship, I'll be singing and I get this feeling in my gut. I get those butterflies where I'm just like, and I get overwhelmed with emotion. And I know God is like using that music and those words to really resonate in my heart.
Personally, I have experienced Him through answered prayer. Really, that's just the best way for me.
Whenever I'm in the middle of doing something or I'm just having a personal prayer time with Him, and whatever the thought is in that moment, it's as if it's completely random and totally outside of anything I'd be thinking naturally on my own.
Everyone has experienced Him in different ways, whether it's through other people, events occurring in their life, or just the Word, just reading the Word.
And other times I hear God talking to me is through His Word, as I'm reading the Bible and going through Scripture.
How do we really know if God is speaking to us, right? It's a fair question, and yet I cringe every time I hear Christians attempt to answer it. Have you ever been in like a prayer circle and been told to just be still and quiet and listen for God's voice? It's one of the most awkward things ever. I mean, what exactly are we listening for? Things like a gentle whisper, or a still small voice, or a word that jumps out to us or stands out in our mind, or a complete sense of peace. I mean, you just told me to sit down and shut up in a quiet room. Of course I'm going to feel a sense of peace. Some say they have heard God's voice through a dream, or from a preacher or a prophet. Some say that voice has come through a friend that's spoken into their life. And it's not that these things can't be true, because they are, and they're in fact biblical. The problem again is that they're just so subjective and therefore unhelpful when someone is looking for an objective way to know for sure if God is speaking to them. When it comes to the supernatural, everyone wishes there was a formula we could use to just make sense of it all. I mean, in some ways, deciphering God's voice is a supernatural act. I mean, He could speak through the fleas on your dog if He wanted to, and yet at the same time, it's kind of logically verifiable as well. So for those of you who enjoy logic and reason, here's a two-part formula you can use. Part 1, right? God speaks through the Bible. So if you want to know what God is saying to you, open up the Bible and start reading it. Start studying history. Start soaking in that wisdom and trying to apply it to your life. As you do, you'll find that you hear God's voice in all that you do. Part 2, get close to others who also know the Bible better than you. That is a great source for someone else to speak into your life God's wisdom and application. And what's the common denominator here? The Bible. Now, I know some people make it sound like they hear from God all the time. Really what they mean is they were reading the Bible one day and they were processing, wrestling with the wisdom in it, and then had this aha moment of how it applies to their life. They use some expression like, God just spoke to me, which I get, and that's awesome. But remember, within Christian circles, that makes sense. Outside of it, dude, you sound like a lunatic. So remember to put that in context when you're around people that don't come from the same background that you do. For the record, no, I have never heard the audible voice of God. Most haven't. Now, I have encountered God through answered prayer and circumstances, even dreams and visions, but that's for a different video. Listen, anytime you're around someone who's claiming to hear directly from God, know that it's totally normal and natural to want to question that. And don't be afraid to ask questions yourself when you're trying to discern whether or not God is actually speaking to you. The truth of the matter is, God desires to speak to each of us with absolute clarity about who we are, who He is, and what He desires from our life. So don't get caught up in others that try to make some complex spiritual process out of something that's actually quite practical.